You heard JP talking about the current situation in Indonesia, but the market hasn't been performing that well. Year to date, it's pretty much flat and perhaps underperforming some of the locals. Is that going to last, or is that picture that JP was painting going to point to an upside?
No, I think actually JP already highlighted where some of the areas might be why it's been flat and why it might change around. So the growth picture for Indonesia looks really good, but the reason why it's been flat, say since the beginning of the year, is that it's been the biggest IPO market on the planet. You don't hear this too often, but yes, the Indonesian IPO market has been bigger than Hong Kong or the US in the first 5 months of this year. So that's quite extraordinary. And that means that people that want to participate in the IPOs, they've been selling stocks in order to keep cash ready and put that into these new companies. That means that you get a bit of selling pressure. So the market has been digesting a lot of these IPOs. Now, I suspect that we're going to see more IPOs, but maybe the pace of IPOs that we've seen in Indonesia is going to slow down a little bit from here. And if then foreign investors come back, they were overweight last year, they've cut that back in order to finance their purchases in China, as people wanted to play the China kind of reopening story. They sold India and Indonesia. I think some of that foreign money is also coming back. So those two dynamics, foreign money coming back, but also people that are in that market, that the IPOs, that overhang is going to diminish a little bit. I think that allows the Indonesian market to perform better again in the second half of this year.
Harold, this is JP. When you look at what's been driving interest in Indonesia, it has to be perhaps one of the biggest reasons is Indonesia trying to leverage its position as the biggest producer of nickel in the world to try and attract all these EV battery investments. But as Australian miners like to say, nickel can be quite fickle, and we've seen nickel price actually start to ease. And there are some that are saying that there might be some prolonged downside actually for nickel prices. If this does happen, could this actually negatively impact some of these newly IPO'd miners in Indonesia? And if so, where else can we find potential upside in Indonesian markets? Is it time to perhaps rotate out of there and somewhere else?
Yeah, so I think you're right. So there's always, of course, a commodity price risk with these nickel producers and these battery material makers. But the interesting thing for Indonesia at the moment is that there are a few drivers of growth out there. It's not just only the electric vehicle battery food chain that is coming into Indonesia, but actually, I was traveling around I got family there. I was traveling around Java a couple of months ago, and I was actually amazed at some of the new toll roads that have been opened up between Yogyakarta and Surabaya and Solo. So it's much easier to get around. And that has created a flow of companies moving into, in particular, Java, but other parts of Indonesia as well. That creates employment opportunities, that creates consumer demand. So that's another key driver. So I think the consumer sector looks interesting. The other sector that people have been looking at in the past is the banking sector, but interest rates might at some point in time start to decline. You were just talking about it, and maybe it might not happen this year, but it could be next year or so. Markets will anticipate that. I don't think the banking sector looks as interesting. So I think it's going to be the focus going to go to the domestic consumer names in the second half of this year.